Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature. To begin with, I'm going to be telling you a bit of background about what the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature is. So GARN started in 2010. It was founded by global leaders who helped power the Universal Declaration of the Rights of Mother Earth in Cochabamba, Bolivia. Later that year in Ecuador, these leaders established an alliance that could power the rights of nature movement to realign our relationship with nature and in turn heal the planet. When GARN started out, the concept of rights of nature was a foreign idea to many people, despite its existence in millennia for indigenous wisdom and culture. But over the last decade, the rights of nature movement has experienced rapidly growth across the globe. The first expression of rights of nature in law began at a regional level in the US in 2006. But since then, countries like Ecuador has adopted it into their constitution, Bolivia has enacted it into national law, New Zealand, Colombia, and India have granted legal personhood to culturally and environmentally significant rivers. And it is currently part of numerous other national, regional, and municipal initiatives around the world, some of which we're going to be hearing about today. So today we're gathered in a listening circle. Listening circles are active and engaging discussions amongst outstanding members of the Rights of Nature movement. They work as an opportunity for debate and as a space for learning and exchanging ideas about this paradigm shift that we're all working towards. The listening circle started as a response to GARN's members and allies voicing their wants and needs for a greater collaboration amongst the communities participating in this work, for sharing legal precedent and techniques, and for creating solidarity for those shouldering the burden of environmental degradation. The goal of these events is to bring together members, partners, and experts to discuss a specific shared interest, topic, or effort. So far, GARN has hosted 4 other listening circles around the following subjects. We've had ecocide, restorative justice, and the rights of nature. We had rights of rivers, also the dialogue between rights of nature and human rights, and the rights of nature in the Chilean Constitution. And you can find all of these on our YouTube channel. Today, we're here for the 5th listening circle about the rights of nature updates around the world. This listening circle will be centered about the latest advances of rights of nature movement around the world. And as mentioned before, the rights of nature movement has been advancing worldwide in a fast pace. And this year, I think, is a very good example of that. Today, we'll be speaking to rights of nature experts and advocates about several cases in Brazil, Colombia, Spain, and Ireland. So let me tell you a little bit about who is joining us today for this conversation. Today, we have Vanessa Jasson. Vanessa is a lawyer and a doctor in rights of nature and the founder of the organization MAPAS in Brazil. She's an expert in the Harmony with Nature program of the UN. And she's an articulator of laws that recognize the rights of nature in Brazilian municipalities and states. We have Rodrigo Rogelis. Rodrigo is a political scientist and philosopher from the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, with complementary studies in history. He holds a master's degree in political science with an emphasis in Colombian politics from the same university. He has 4 years of specific experience in quantitative research on environmental and social movements, environmental conflicts, land conflicts, and social legal analysis, as well as 2 years of experience accompanying ethnic authorities in Chocó. He currently serves as the Deputy Director of Research at the Social Legal Center of Territorial Defense, Siembra, where he also accompanies research processes relevant to territorial defense organizations in Chocó and Cajamarca. Today, we also have with us Eduardo Salazar. Eduardo is a professor of human rights and rights of nature in the University of Murcia and a member of the Promoter Commission of the Popular Legislative Initiative for the Recognition of Legal Personality and Rights of the Mar Menor and its Basin. Last but not least, we have Peter Doran from Ireland. Dr. Peter Doran is a senior lecturer at the School of Law at Queen's University Belfast in Northern Ireland. He is a founder member of the Green Party in Northern Ireland and a recent co-founder of the Environmental Justice Network Ireland and the Wellbeing Economy Alliance Hub Ireland. He's currently leading a legal collaboration on a submission on the rights of nature to the Citizens Assembly on Biodiversity Laws, convened by the Irish government in Dublin. Dr. Doran is the author of Towards a Political Economy of Attention, Consumerism, and Mindfulness, The Mindful Commons. So to begin with, I want to open the floor. We're going to begin with Vanessa. So Vanessa is going to tell us a little bit about her work. So Vanessa, go ahead. You have 10 minutes for your intervention. Thank you.
Thank you, Rafaela. Muchas gracias. Buenos días, buenas tardes a todas y todos. Hablo aquí de Brasil, de São Paulo. Y pido disculpas, voy a hablar en español, o mejor diciendo en portuñol, para que me quede más ampliado la posibilidad de compartir con ustedes acerca de lo que nosotros tenemos ha sido hecho acá en Brasil. Quiero también agradecer a GARN, Global Alliance for Rights of Nature, por la invitación a hacer estos círculos de debates, de ponencias de compartimiento de las cosas que tenemos hecho. Es muy importante para que otras personas se inspiren y para que nuestro trabajo también sea divulgado para, sobre todo para las comunidades y los políticos que las representan. Hay una propuesta de hablar sobre lo que tenemos hecho y también sobre las dificultades que tenemos encontrado y sobre las dificultades estos círculos son capaces de contribuir para superarlas, que es exactamente poner en cuenta con los políticos, los demás alcaldes y mayors, los representantes de las asambleas de donde hicimos acá en Brasil las leyes, que es un asunto importante que tiene sido debatido por muchas personas y expertos de todo el mundo, como acá tenemos este experto que me da mucho gusto de compartir este círculo, y que así que nos den espacio para hacer más y más conversatorios y promoviendo más y más los reconocimientos de los derechos de la naturaleza en las leyes de diversos niveles. En Brasil nosotros tenemos una oportunidad de hacer leyes en el nivel municipal, en la ciudad, con mucho más autonomía que muchos otros países. Nuestra Constitución Federal nos llega a esta posibilidad porque confiere a los municipios en esta esfera de la localidad una autonomía gigantesca para que pueda hacer sus propias leyes de acuerdo con sus condiciones bioculturales. Creo que por cuenta de Brasil, ser este país con este tamaño tan grande, esta es la mejor solución para que tenemos efectivamente leyes que respeten esos aspectos de la culturalidad y de la bioculturalidad, que es muy diversa en Brasil, no solo por el tamaño del país, pero por la diversidad biológica de la naturaleza como un todo, presupondo que los seres humanos también son miembros de la naturaleza. Nosotros todos tenemos mucha diversidad acá. Y también porque nosotros creemos que la ley que se viene a reconocer los derechos de naturaleza tiene que hacer un poco más do que traer una nueva herramienta para la defensa de la naturaleza. La ley necesita cambiar, proponer y hacer este cambio radical del paradigma antropocéntrico para un paradigma ecocéntrico y hacerlo a partir de las localidades, das leyes que son más conectadas, muy más próximas de los seres humanos que allí conviven en aquella comunidad local. Es una manera mucho más efectiva de contribuir para este cambio radical que necesitamos. Quiero decir que para nosotros apenas pelear por la defensa de la naturaleza, ya no pasa más nada. Porque si fuese así, la legislación ambiental, que al menos en Brasil tenemos mucho buena, una legislación que cuida del medio ambiente con esta perspectiva antropocéntrica, muy buena para hacer las luchas en la esfera del poder judiciario, con la justicia. Y tenemos toda esta destrucción que avanza en Brasil. Entonces, no se trata de pelear, porque cuando peleamos en la justicia, el tiempo pasa, el tiempo se escorre por las manos y la destrucción de la naturaleza permanece. Así que la propuesta es hacer el cambio desde adentro de los seres humanos para que rescatemos la vida en armonía con los demás seres de la naturaleza. Con esto como filosofía de trabajo, Mapas tiene articulado las propuestas de leyes, especialmente en el nivel municipal, y ahora tenemos decenas, muchas propuestas encaminadas o siendo articuladas o ya encaminadas en las cámaras, en chambers, formalmente, en proceso formal, casi todas ya con el parecer de la Comisión de Justicia, que analiza la legalidad, que analiza la oportunidad favorablemente. Y tenemos ahora 4 municipios en Brasil que reconocen los derechos de la naturaleza. El primero, el municipio de Bonito, en el interior de Pernambuco, junto con el municipio, el segundo, el municipio de Paudalho, también en el interior de Pernambuco. En 2018 aprobaron este reconocimiento con desdobramientos en las políticas públicas, especialmente en las políticas públicas de un planeamiento de transformación de la agricultura para una agricultura ecológica, una agricultura que presupone la diversidad necesaria para la permanencia de la riqueza y de la vida abundante del suelo, y también para que se respete la florestía y no se derrube la florestía para plantar. El tercer municipio fue Florianópolis, es una capital en Brasil, la capital del estado de Santa Catarina, que tiene ahora una serie de políticas públicas, algunas empezadas mismo antes del reconocimiento de los derechos de la naturaleza, y que con este reconocimiento fortaleció muchísimo, muchísimo. Y con este movimiento que estamos haciendo, los estados, los representantes de los estados, empezaron a nos procurar, queriendo traer también en el nivel de los estados, con las asambleas de leyes que son una otra instancia, un otro nivel de ponencia de leyes, y que pueden fomentar, estimular que los municipios de todo el estado reconozcan también los derechos de la naturaleza. Así que tenemos ahora algunos estados proponiendo ya formalmente, con uno de ellos, creo que 2 de ellos, ya con también pareceres de la Comisión de Justicia, para nosotros una comisión muy importante, que como que aprueba toda la oportunidad, la legalidad, la incidencia jurídica en la pirámide normativa de la legislación de Brasil. Y así que tenemos Pará, el estado de Pará, donde se queda en parte la Amazonía, reconociendo con esta propuesta de alteración de la principal ley en aspecto del Estado, que es la Constitución estadual. Tenemos acá en Brasil esta autonomía en el ámbito de los estados también, con una constitución para ordenar el Estado. Y Pará es el primero, Pará que ya tiene una ley que reconoce el día, que promulga el Día del Buen Vivir, y que promueve así diversas actividades alineadas, conectadas con los derechos de la naturaleza. Así también, en el municipio también la aprobación se queda siempre en la ley mayor del municipio, que es como una constitución municipal que llamamos de una ley orgánica, pero tiene esta posición de la ley superior dentro de esta región de la localidad municipal. Voltando al estado, después de Pará, Minas Gerais, el estado de Minas Gerais, donde se queda la minería de una forma muy destructiva. La minería por sí sola ya es una actividad muy destructiva, pero en Minas Gerais, ustedes deben ter conectado con la noticia de los crímenes ocurridos con las mineradoras en Mariana, con la muerte, provocando la muerte del río Dulce, del río Uatú, en la lengua krenak. Y en la otra situación, provocando más de 300 muertes con esta actividad de minería. Ahora tenemos Minas Gerais promoviendo este reconocimiento en el nivel estadual, y el último municipio, yo lo digo 4, el último municipio que aprobó este reconocimiento de los derechos a la naturaleza es el municipio de Cerro. Cerro, que se queda exactamente en Minas Gerais y que, sí, Rafa, gracias. Tengo más 2 minutos. Y que está sufriendo ahora la amenaza de una nueva minería en su territorio, el municipio de Cerro, y el municipio de Cerro acaba de aprobar este reconocimiento ahora en el mes de junio de los derechos de la naturaleza. Y en el ámbito de mapas, nos tenemos un departamento de advocacy que promueve exactamente estas actividades de articulación para las leyes, y que estamos ahora planeando con amigos Curie defender la naturaleza de la Serra del Curral, Serra do Curral. Y conectando con este reconocimiento en el cerro, conectando con la propuesta para el estado de Minas Gerais. Y por fin, Santa Catarina. Santa Catarina, el estado donde se queda el municipio de Florianópolis, que ya reconoce los derechos de la naturaleza, también hice su propuesta para la constitución, a la alteración de la constitución estadual. Por fin, quiero solo contar que nosotros trabajamos también al lado de la actividad de la estrategia de la advocacy con la estrategia de la educación ecológica, teniendo en cuenta que la ley no es nadie si las personas no aprenden este conocimiento con la ayuda de la ley para este efectivo cambio desde adentro. Entonces, nosotros creamos, estamos muy próximos de GARN con esta creación, la Escuela del Buen Vivir, donde estamos empezando a proponer nuevas formas de acceder este conocimiento a respecto de lo que se trata. Y esta es una pregunta que yo escucho mucho de las personas que me pregunto así, pero ¿qué significan los derechos de la naturaleza en la práctica? Entonces, con la Escuela del Buen Vivir, nosotros estamos demostrando lo que es los derechos de la naturaleza en la práctica y enseñando a partir de la arte la conexión del derecho y la vida en armonía con la naturaleza, catalizada por medio de la arte, así empezando a comunicar a partir del corazón. Para lembrar mi conterráneo brasileño, Leonardo Boff, que tiene un libro que dije que es preciso dejar de raciocinar para empezar a corazonar. Por acaso yo estoy hoy con no fue de propósito, pero yo estoy aquí con esta ropa para contar y recordar de hablar sobre esto. Entonces, que nosotros podamos cada vez más conectar con el corazón que piensa de acuerdo con las cosmovisiones de los pueblos originarios donde nosotros estamos intentando hacer este aprendizado cada vez más amplio y profundizado a respecto de los derechos de la naturaleza. Muchas gracias más una vez, Rafaela, pela oportunidade. Gracias, Nachi. Un abrazo.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for that wonderful intervention and for all the work that you're doing. Everything is important, as you were saying, as much legal advocacy and even education. We need to work at every single level. So that's very important. I also want to remind you all that we'll have a space at the end for some conversation among each other and some dialogue. So yeah, definitely keep some of your conversation for the end and stick around. So we're going to continue with Rodrigo Rogelis. He's going to tell us a little bit about the Atrato River case in Colombia. Adelante, Rodrigo.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for this invitation. We are very excited to make interchanges with people that are working on this subject around the world, because as Vanessa just told, we are now in the phase where we need to make the rights of nature a practical, effective way of protecting nature and communities. So we're really excited to be here and share a bit our experience. I'm from a socio-legal center, I guess. I know the name in Spanish, so I'm trying to translate in my mind, but I'm sorry. We accompany the guardians of the Atrato River, which are representatives of the local communities that live in the Atrato River, and they are the voice of the river, and they represent the river in the negotiations with the Colombian government on the implementation. The ruling T622 that was effected in 2016 ruled that the river needed to be represented by local communities, and the communities gather around and decided that they were gonna build a collective way of representing the river. So it's like it's almost like a community of representatives. There are 14, and we accompany them in the process of implementing the ruling. And I want to tell you a little bit about the context in which this ruling and the guardians as a collective, a work collective emerges. And the Atrato River is located in the Pacific coast of Colombia, and that is very meaningful because that means that is a particular territory that has specificities that don't make part of other parts of Colombia. That means that it's a really rich, a really natural, it has a natural richness, but also a cultural richness. Enormous, actually. We have Afro-Colombian communities, we have indigenous communities, we have peasant communities, all living in this amazingly exuberant natural place that is just beautiful. And because of the history of Colombia, is a place that doesn't have like institutional governmental institutions present in the region. So it's kind of like a place where communities have developed a cultural, social, and economy by way of their own evolution and by way of their relationship with the river. And that's what I want to point. Maybe that it's really interesting when you go to Atrato and meet people and talk with people, you realize that there is almost like a symbiotic relationship between local communities and the river in the way that they speak about it. The rivers is they always say like river is life, meaning that is the scenery of life, where life happens, but also what permits communities to live and just enjoy the richness of the territory. And that started changing when certain foreign economies, extractive economies, arrived to the territory. And I'm talking about mining, I'm talking about cattle. I don't know how cattle, is that the word? Cattle. Also just logging, and there are other ones, but I cannot come up with the names in Spanish right now. So, but those three are like the main ones. And this initiated a humanitarian crisis, because then those economies married themselves with the Colombian conflict. So a lot of these economies are are supported by illegal groups that make money by just expanding these economies. So effectively, what started to happen is that the territory and the river started degrading, and because of that, the communal life started also degrading, because the symbiotic relationship started to break, in the sense that the ancestral system of administration of natural resources, or the river, started to disappear by the greed and power of these illegal armed groups, and also the negligence of the state that didn't do anything. And that started a slow process of really disappearing this beautiful way of symbiotism that the Atrato River represented. And that brings us to the ruling T622, which in 2006 declared the river as a subject of rights, but it did it in a way that it supported on a biocultural framework, in the sense that it recognized this symbiotic relationship and granted rights to the river as a way of recognizing the biocultural power that communities had in that territory. And what does that mean? Our interpretation and the Guardian's interpretation of this is that the way in which the rights of nature are, I don't know, fertile, how do you say this? The way they become a reality, the way they become a practical, effective thing, is not only by restoring the environmental conditions of the ecosystem, but actually to restore the relationship between communities and the river. That's why we think this case is so amazing, and we love working at it, because it has this integral symbiotic thing that recognizes and really pushes forward to work along with it. And that means that the solutions are integral. It's not one-sided, but it has to be an integral process, in the sense that the ruling aims at recovering the ecosystem, obviously, but also to recover traditional forms of production and traditional ways of managing the territory that communities had for centuries. Recognizing in that way that relationship, and restoring the river and communities in that way. And I mean, I don't know if later we're gonna talk about the challenges of this process. I'm gonna maybe situate the place where these challenges arise for us, and it's actually making it practical, because the ruling came out 5 years ago, and it ordered this integral rehabilitation of the relationship with communities and the river. But that clashes, that is a novelty that clashes with the same bureaucratic and political system that permitted the degradation of the river and the relationship with communities. And that clash, it's almost like it's a practical issue. It's almost like a bureaucratic issue, because the river, it's ecosystemical structure, and the communities in the way they relate to it, it's not easily translated to the legislation and the normatives that exist. And not only that, but actually the whole system in which the government operates it cannot relate to it, simply by the fact that, the river is so huge here that it goes through 26 municipalities. It goes through 2 states, 2 departments. It has this mix of authorities that don't really coordinate, because the way that the state is thought, it's not in the idea of the catchment of the river. It's thought around the idea of these fictional boundaries or limits that really don't make sense when you're trying to implement an integral rehabilitation of a river that is that huge and that exceeds the way the bureaucratic system and the administrative system is thought of. And that, that challenge is also, I guess, gets worse by the realities of our corrupt political system, that in many ways it's been our Achilles heel. And that I mean, the corruption at the local level, the local and the central level, the problems with the structure of the government that is not think along the lines of a river, and also the conflict, the armed conflict that is still going on, makes it a challenge to control the territory and give that administration to local communities, because there's the power of guns. And those are the challenges we're facing right now. And that's where our relationship with the Guardians lies. We are collectively trying to move the government to do something different here, because the things that have been done in the Atrato River have never worked. So it needs something different. It needs a new way, a new approach, and the ruling with the rights of nature and its biocultural framework, I think it's a perfect way to create and try to do this. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you guys.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. And I think that was a great example of how the rights of nature approach can be more holistic than other approaches that we've tried before. And, we still run into challenges as well. So we're going to have a conversation about that a bit later on to see how perhaps other approaches in different parts of the world can help, your specific case, or how your case can influence other cases in other places around the world. So we're going to continue with Eduardo Salazar. He's going to tell us a little bit more about the Mar Menor case. So Eduardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Voy a hacer la presentación en español despacio para que se pueda traducir bien, porque creo que me voy a sentir más cómodo y bueno, como la mayoría podéis entenderme. Bueno, pues yo tengo la suerte de trabajar en el Mar Menor, que es la foto que tenéis aquí detrás, que se ve detrás de mi cabeza. Y tengo la suerte de trabajar en la recuperación y un poco en el cambio de paradigma a la hora de enfrentarnos a la situación del Mar Menor, a la situación ecológica del Mar Menor, y de haber coincidido con Teresa Vicente, que es la profesora de Filosofía del Derecho de aquí de la Universidad de Murcia, en el sureste de España, y es la que inició la propuesta de cambiar el paradigma a la hora de cuidar el Mar Menor y cambiar el paradigma antropocéntrico a un paradigma ecocéntrico en base precisamente a las experiencias que podemos ver en el resto del mundo, como por ejemplo la del río Atrato, otros ríos en otros países del mundo, y un poco gracias al trabajo de organizaciones como GAN, que nos ponen en contacto con estas experiencias en todo el mundo y nos hacen sentirnos, por lo menos la sensación que nos da, nos hace sentirnos menos raros cuando estamos planteando este cambio de filosofía, este cambio de enfoque, que también lo queremos para el Mar Menor. Muy brevemente, el Mar Menor es una laguna costera que es fruto de una explotación a su alrededor, no directamente la laguna, pero a su alrededor, que ha conseguido que este ecosistema colapse, es decir, que este ecosistema esté a punto, al borde de la muerte. Esa situación se ha venido produciendo en los últimos 30 o 40 años y, bueno, nosotros se supone que tenemos el derecho ambiental más avanzado del planeta, porque eso es de lo que presumen los europeos y las autoridades europeas, los políticos europeos y también los juristas europeos, los profesores y abogados que se dedican al derecho ambiental. Tenemos el sistema más avanzado, pero ese sistema evidentemente ha fracasado. Por muy avanzado que sea, si no sirve para proteger a ecosistemas como el que tenemos aquí en el Mar Menor, a nosotros no nos vale. Y por eso es muy importante el cambio de paradigma, el cambio de chip que hemos planteado aquí en el Mar Menor para pasar de considerar el Mar Menor como un objeto a considerarlo como un sujeto. ¿Cómo lo hemos intentado hacer? Pues a lo mejor en otros sitios la propuesta o la situación ha venido por una sentencia o ha venido por una ley propuesta por los alcaldes o por los diputados nacionales. Aquí lo hemos hecho de una forma mucho más participativa. Lo hemos planteado como una iniciativa legislativa popular que lo que ha hecho ha sido, primeramente, lo que intentamos fue hacerla a nivel local, es decir, a nivel de que en un ayuntamiento de la ribera del Mar Menor se fuera hacia la asamblea de la región, porque España está dividida en 17 comunidades autónomas o regiones que tienen capacidad legislativa. Bien, pues esa iniciativa regional fracasó porque la asamblea de la región de Murcia dijo que era incompetente para hacer un cambio de esa naturaleza. Entonces, lo que hicimos fue plantear, y de ahí lo de comisión promotora de la iniciativa legislativa popular, 8 personas planteamos una iniciativa legislativa popular estatal. Eso exigía recoger 500.000 firmas. 500.000 firmas manuscritas, es decir, no teníamos la posibilidad de hacerlo por Internet, porque la ley es del año 1983, y el sistema de seguridad que nos exigía el Congreso para una firma electrónica era muy complicado y muy costoso económicamente. Entonces tuvimos que salir a la calle en plena pandemia, es decir, en una situación límite en la que incluso estaba prohibido al principio salir de las casas, y tuvimos que ir poco a poco conquistando las calles, no solo de la región de Murcia, sino también de toda España, a través de una organización muy espontánea, pero muy eficaz. No hemos utilizado ninguna estructura de ningún sindicato o de ninguna organización ecologista nacional, sino que ha sido todo espontáneo, muy ciudadano, muy de andar por casa o de gente que se ha movilizado de una forma sorprendente y muy emotiva y muy emocionante también, porque ha entendido el mensaje que planteaba Teresa Vicente de cambiar el chip, de cambiar el enfoque y de darle derechos a la laguna. Eso la gente lo ha entendido y lo ha firmado y lo fueron firmando poco a poco. Y bueno, aunque en Murcia se han conseguido la mayoría de firmas, ha habido recogida de firmas no solo en Murcia, sino en todas las ciudades de España e incluso en ciudades europeas donde había ciudadanos españoles, es decir, en Berlín, en Finlandia, en Inglaterra, en Francia. Las hojas de firmas han viajado por toda Europa y por toda España y al final, en un año, que era el plazo que nos habían otorgado el Congreso, conseguimos 640.000 firmas, es decir, superamos bastante el mínimo de 500.000. Ahora mismo, la iniciativa legislativa popular en la que estamos peleando todavía para que la tramitación no se retrase, pues ahora mismo está superando todos los controles parlamentarios del Congreso español. Entonces, la iniciativa ahora mismo se convirtió en proyecto de ley hace unos meses, hace 2 o 3 meses, se convirtió en proyecto de ley porque fue asumida por el Congreso de los Diputados con una mayoría muy amplia y actualmente ya ha terminado el periodo de enmiendas que pueden hacer los diputados, es decir, modificaciones al texto de la ley propuesta por los ciudadanos. Con lo cual, posiblemente para finales de julio, y si no finales de julio, porque en agosto España se para, no funciona España en agosto, pues si no para julio, para septiembre, es casi seguro que tengamos una ley que reconozca derechos al Mar Menor y sería posiblemente la primera ley en Europa que además surgida de abajo arriba, es decir, de la ciudadanía, fruto de la participación, que daría derechos a un ecosistema. Esto no ha sido fácil, no está siendo fácil. Hay algún partido político que se opone y que dice que va a llevar la ley al Tribunal Constitucional. Hay muchos profesores de Derecho Ambiental que esto no lo ven, que dicen que esto es un disparate, que dicen que esto no va a servir para nada. Hay críticas muy duras, pero realmente nosotros estamos tan convencidos de que es lo que necesita la protección del ecosistema, incluso el planeta, la biosfera, el Mar Menor y también el ser humano, para entender exactamente, como decía Vanessa, que somos una especie más, que no somos los dueños de la naturaleza, pues estamos tan convencidos que pensamos que va a ser un precedente muy importante para Europa, para que las otras iniciativas que se están llevando en Europa a través de la Unión Europea o en Francia o en Holanda o en Italia, pues puedan también seguir y cambiar el modelo, porque realmente Europa es muy clásica en materia jurídica. Europa es tremendamente conservadora, además de presuntuosa y presumida en cuanto a su moderno derecho ambiental, es muy conservadora a la hora de cambiar el modelo hacia imitando o fijándonos en lo que se está haciendo en otras partes del mundo, donde, por supuesto, existe una filosofía también muy útil y una sociología y toda una cosmovisión de la que podemos aprender. Y no sé si me queda algún minuto más, simplemente para decir que la iniciativa legislativa popular no solo se limita a reconocer derechos al Mar Menor, sino que tiene apartados que buscan el empoderamiento de la ciudadanía a la hora de cuidar el Mar Menor y gestionar el Mar Menor mediante unos guardianes, unos órganos representativos, un comité científico, es decir, se busca cambiar el modelo de gestión participativa del ecosistema. Y por último también tiene una parte muy importante del acceso a la justicia de esos derechos de la naturaleza, porque instituye una acción popular para que cualquier ciudadano que pueda haber vulnerado los derechos del Mar Menor pueda acudir a los tribunales. Esto lo que nos permite es que los tribunales se conviertan también en protagonistas de esta nuevo paradigma, nuevo enfoque de derechos de la naturaleza y que pronto haya sentencias que determinen si una actividad o una planificación o cualquier otra circunstancia está vulnerando los derechos del Mar Menor, que evidentemente se van a ver delimitados no solo por la declaración de la ley, sino por el comité científico que va a determinar lo que es bueno o malo, lo que es mejor o peor para el ecosistema. Y bueno, pues no sé si queréis, ya me quedo un poco pendiente de las preguntas que podáis hacer luego y sobre todo yo tengo también alguna pregunta para los compañeros y me gustaría que compartiesen con nosotros porque nos queda mucho trabajo. Esto es solo un reconocimiento legal, evidentemente hay que trabajar mucho luego a pie de calle, ¿no?
Thank you so much, Eduardo, for your words and for the work that you're doing. This is the community level work is as we all know very challenging, but you've proven that with the community you can actually make things change, and clearly there is a long path forward to the implementation side of things. So we're going to have a good conversation about that with the rest of the experts here. So we're going to continue with Dr. Doran. He's going to tell us a little bit more about what's going on in Ireland. And then we will open the floor to a conversation. I have some questions for you, and you also have the opportunity to ask questions to your peer presenters as well. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be with you, to join you from the island of Ireland. I'm based in Northern Ireland, which is part of the continuing British jurisdiction. And of course, the island of Ireland has the Republic of Ireland, which is an autonomous republic. I'm going to talk to you about the developments in the rights of nature on both parts of the island, and in particular, and with some significance, the municipal developments at the local council level along the border in the northwest of Ireland. One development in the city of Derry, which is within the UK jurisdiction, and then across the border in the Republic of Ireland in Donegal. I just want to note the importance of developments in Europe, and I'm hoping that Eduardo and his colleagues and others will watch with great interest developments in Ireland. We will need your support and visibility in order to take forward these developments on the island of Ireland as well. The developments are happening both at the local municipal level, and there's also a possibility, a development at the national level in the Republic of Ireland, and I'll come on to that in a moment. And first of all, on the municipal level, in solidarity with the Global Rights of Nature movement, in June last year, Derry City and Strabane District Council, which is right on the border in the northwest, it's within the UK sector, adopted a pioneering motion on the rights of nature. In the motion, the council recognizes that regard for the rights of nature, nature's right to thrive, flourish, move through us, to sustain us, and inter-exist with us as humans, can act as a catalyst for an emergent new economic paradigm, one that is post-extractivist and regenerative. And within days, a similar motion was adopted by a neighbouring council, Fermanagh and Omagh District Council, followed quickly by a motion passed by Donegal County Council on the other side of the border. So this is very much border thinking and border practice in action. Often at the borders, there's a prefiguring of the future at these liminal edges of jurisdictions. And I think with the rise of the rights of nature movement and these adoptions of motions and local authorities right on the border, we see examples of this prefiguring going on, examples of border thinking. Sometimes the most innovative and futuristic proposals come from the edges of jurisdictions. Now, in doing so, in adopting these motions, councils across the island of Ireland have embarked on what I would suggest are a significant challenge to the dominant paradigm of environmental law and, of course, the associated planning laws, which are both really expressions of property law, the dominant paradigm or informing model of the lawscape in most of Europe. In both the Republic of Ireland and in Northern Ireland, where nature has been seen until now as a silent victim of what is really a neoliberal peace process. The context in Ireland, especially in Northern Ireland, for these motions and the rise of a grassroots movement is a response to a peace process which has been going on for about 25 years. It's currently experiencing the latest stage of a political crisis in terms of the institutions. But there has been an inbuilt crisis in the peace process in the sense that the environment and ecology has been rendered invisible. It has not been part of the discourse of transitional justice in the course of building peace and building a new economy. Far from it, the new economy is very much the old neoliberal order reasserting itself at the expense of nature as a subject of history. So in the larger historical context, especially the colonial context for the island of Ireland, the emergence of the rights of nature movement in both jurisdictions also signals an overturning of an old order. It's drawing attention to a very old order that goes back to colonial times, and it's drawing attention to the ways in which the peace process has reproduced some of the dominant narratives around the economy that have their origins in that colonial experience on the island of Ireland. It is generally accepted that the island of Ireland functioned as an important frontier and testing ground for the new techniques and imaginaries that were crucial to the formation of the Atlantic economy and to the expansion of the capitalist world ecology. Descartes has observed that Ireland served as a geographical stepping stone for the British colonial project, for the transatlantic settlement, and a laboratory for Britain's trials for techniques of privatization and expropriation. So Ireland's pre-colonial and pre-capitalist ecological systems were cleared of indigenous resistance by all means necessary, including through tactical starvation of the population. As recorded in the now infamous record kept by Edmund Spenser in his book, A View of the Present State of Ireland, published in 1598. Now I want to move on to a note and really an invitation to you, to all of you, my panelists, and all of you who are participating today in this exercise. And I want to draw attention to a citizens' assembly, an important government-sponsored initiative in Dublin, in the Republic of Ireland, on biodiversity loss. Now, the importance of that is that that assembly is sitting until the end of the year, and it is taking submissions from people and organizations, both on the island of Ireland, but also international advocates and I suppose experts who have something to say about the causes, the fundamental causes of the loss of biodiversity and ways in which we might begin to address biodiversity loss, both on the island and globally. And that one of my roles at the moment is to collate an expert legal submission to the Assembly, the Citizens' Assembly in Dublin. And I'm doing that in collaboration with a number of colleagues across the island and in the UK. And I'd like to invite those of you who have an interest in biodiversity and the rights of nature as a response to the fundamental drivers of the loss of biodiversity to make a submission to the Citizens' Assembly in Dublin, advocating the rights of nature, advocating the rights of nature to be a subject of our history, advocating that nature must now share the rights of the people of the island as part of our response to the crisis of biodiversity loss that go right back to our original history of colonialism. Now, this is an innovative democratic mechanism, the Citizens' Assembly, used by the Irish government to air important policy debates and generate substantive proposals that have done so on climate, on equal marriage rights and reproductive health. And the recommendations from the Citizens' Assembly will go straight to the government apparatus in Dublin for consideration. There are possibilities that might result in terms of legislation or even a recommendation for a constitutional amendment, which in the case of Ireland would require a referendum, a popular referendum. So I would invite you to consider making a submission proposing some of these pathways to enshrining the rights of nature in the laws of Ireland as your contribution. And we make that invitation in solidarity with you, with all of you who are subjects of your history and who are currently engaged in the struggle to make nature a subject of our history once again as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doran. That was a very important intervention, and your invitation is also well received, not only for the Global Alliance for the Rights of Nature, but I'm sure for the rest of the presenters and experts here as well, and to anybody that is listening. So I'm sure we're going to continue to take that conversation offline, but thank you so much for that invitation. So we're going to begin with the conversation here. I have some questions. I know some of you might also have some questions for your peers. So ideally, if you can all turn your cameras on. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you all. And we're going to continue with this conversation. So to begin with, I want to open up this conversation by asking you all, how do you think your experience can be replicated in other territories? I know you have all mentioned the specific structure of the governance of your territories, but it would be interesting to see if you think your experience could be taken somewhere else and as an example and using rights of nature as a tool for conservation.
Thank you, Rafaela. Iría empezar a hablar en inglés. No voy a intentar. Creo que organizaciones como MAPAS, como la propia GARN, ¿no? Una de las pioneras, el programa Harmony with Nature, empezar a crear estos tipos de organizaciones para hacer lo advocacy, o para ustedes que no necesitan crear una organización pero procurar una organización que esté trabajando con este tema en sus territorios, sea una forma práctica de individualmente conectar al movimiento y hacer acciones de advocacy. No es una cosa complicada, no, se trata de poner este discurso en cuenta por donde fueres y sobre todo de accionar. Todos los políticos son electos para hacer la representación de nosotros para las decisiones en el ámbito político, en el ámbito de las leyes. Así que procurar el político donde nosotros ponemos nuestra representación en el mundo político es una acción necesaria y una acción legitimada, ¿no? Además que esta creación de este sistema de educación que acá llamamos con nuestros amigos indígenas de la educación viva, una educación que se queda abierta a todos, una educación que no se queda en un solo territorio, pero que necesita ser replicada por todo el mundo, es una otra forma de hacer este cambio, de contribuir, espajando esta semilla de la educación ecológica para los derechos a la naturaleza, para el buen vivir, con destino a la vida, al rescate de la vida en armonía con la naturaleza, sería muy bueno, sería importante, y nosotros estamos haciendo esto. Como dijo nuestra Escuela del Buen Vivir, como las cosas de la tierra misma, nació junto, sin que estuviésemos hablando, con una iniciativa de la Global Alliance, hablando con Juan Sebastián, uno de los coordinadores del RUB en Latinoamérica. Y así cuando hablamos, vimos que esta experiencia estaba naciendo al mismo tiempo. Y así también estamos descubriendo que hay otras iniciativas en el mundo, y creo que esta es una forma muy interesante de hacer con que el movimiento se quede más amplio, más profundizado y con más acciones concretas, más acciones prácticas. No solo para que los derechos de la naturaleza sean una cosa palpable, una cosa verdadera, una cosa que está siendo viva, pero también para hacer esto mismo advocacy por medio de la educación, formando personas, adultos o niños o jóvenes que puedan así continuar hablando sobre esto y caminando con esto legado, ¿no? Así creo que son actitudes prácticas. Quiero apenas empezar, reforzar, porque las personas cuando me preguntan cómo hacerlo, cómo contribuir, yo tengo esta sensación que piensan que es una cosa muy compleja, muy grande. No necesita hacer de una manera compleja y grande. Son pequeñas acciones a partir de la localidad, de su barrio, de su familia, de su barrio, de la organización más próxima, con su representante político y así más. Gracias.
Thank you, Vanessa. And I think I resonate with what you're saying is that no initiative is too small to get started. And you can get started with your family, you can get started with your own organization, and then go from there. So that's a great example. Is there anybody else that wants to answer to this question?
Yeah, I can try it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, in terms of the possible replication of our experience, I think it depends on the context, obviously, because not every community and its relationship with the territory is the same. But I would say that something that has worked really well here is that there's at least we're trying to conform a governance system that puts local communities in government in the same space of dialogue and of decision. So we're trying to make kind of like a system that co-governs, if that makes sense. And that it's not only a political statement, a political and symbolic important statement, but it's also a practical thing that is really useful, because in countries like Latin America, but I bet this occurs in every country, there are radical differences in ecosystemic characteristics and social characteristics in different regions. And sometimes governments, when they try to implement or apply law to a region that they don't actually understand, that money that goes into the funding of that project or that law becomes wasted, because it's done with a knowledge that is not applicable to a certain region. So a system of co-governance in which local communities and government make decisions together, it's essential. And in things so minimal as the types of trees that are going to be used in a reforestation project, you know. There's been a lot of stories of government institutions just by reading of a scientific paper, they find the type of tree that is gonna be reforested, and that actually doesn't work there. But communities know what does work and what does not work, because they've been working with the territory for years. They have this knowledge of how things work. So it's, in a practical sense, it's really useful to have these systems of governance, of co-governance, when especially in implementation processes, to give way to local community knowledge. It's very important. We are trying to do that. It does not always work. There's a lot of challenges in that regard, but at least that could be the aim of context similar to that of Colombia.
That is great. Thank you so much, Rodrigo, for that. And to continue with the conversation, I know Eduardo had a question for the fellow panelists. Eduardo, if you want to go ahead and ask your question and we can go from there.
Yes, my question is related to what Rodrigo have talked about before seconds. So about the governance, because the new approach of rights of nature, I say new in Europe because we have lose the indigenous culture of that you had in other countries. My question is how to link rights of nature and governance. I mean, how deep must be public participation in the management of the ecosystem? You have talked about put in the same level. You, Rodrigo, have talked about put on the same level authorities. So I mean, public authorities and citizens. And this is you have created a new body. How do you manage in a administrative or legal structure this kind of model?
Well, it's a difficult question because we are not sure that we have the answer yet. The way it has functioned, I think it has to do with the strength of the social movements of Chocó, which is the region where the Atrato River is. They had organized probably since 50 years ago, and they've been in this continued process to influence certain laws that gives them certain prerogatives. And the strengthening of those prerogatives has permitted them to at least have a seat in an administration sense, because I mean, there's the political pressure of elites that don't want this to happen. But at least legally, the social movement here has been so strong that it has managed to promulgate certain laws that empowers the local communities. So when the sentence came about, there was all this social movement structure already going on and already with certain strength. So it was possible for the Constitutional Court to take that into account and put forward certain resolutions, or at least to order to order the government to put out certain resolutions that recognize that social movement as the head of the co-governance that I'm talking about. So the way it happens, it's actually that this administrative process, this co-governance has been the tip of the iceberg of a long process that I think it's successful, and we have to give credit to the Afro-Colombian movement and the indigenous movement of Chocó, because if that movement didn't exist, it would have been impossible to make a co-governance system, because at least those social movements were already politically recognized. That does not mean that it works perfectly, because as you know, these governmental institutions have always been here co-opted by certain political and economic elites that don't like to co-govern. So even though there's this collectively recognized guardians of the Atrato River, everything has to be done like really slowly, talking with people, trying to convince local governments, trying to convince authorities, public authorities, and sometimes you find a crack. Sometimes you find a little ally that you can take the opportunity and expand that system of governance. But it's an everyday struggle to make this co-governance work and recognize. And it also depends on the electoral, who is in power or who's not. So it's a slow process, and all credit to the social movements here. That would be my answer.
Thank you, Rodrigo. Does anybody else want to add to Eduardo's question?
Creo apenas para sumar, si bien que Rodrigo habló muy bien sobre esta sistemática que es precisamente con que estás trabajando, ¿no, Rodrigo? Pero siempre hay que traer la charla, la presencia de los pueblos originarios, ¿no? Hay que traer ellos para el círculo, y siempre que empiecen ellos con las palabras, las primeras palabras en un círculo. Como por acá, por ejemplo, sería muy bueno que tuviésemos un representante, ¿no? Es esto. Esto es una reclamación muy, muy fuerte acá en Brasil. Tuvimos ahora un problema muy, muy grande con un asesinato de dos representantes de pueblos indígenas de la lucha, y en la primera mesa sobre los encaminamientos para resolver la cuestión, no había ningún indígena, ninguno. Es muy delicado esta situación, ¿no? Entonces creo que para contribuir, tener en cuenta siempre esto.
Thank you, Vanessa. I totally agree with you. And it's very important to have representation at every level of the advocacy, and also in the legal level and in the governance level. So that is very crucial. We are going to continue with the next question that I have for you all. What is missing to fully apply and grant rights of nature to your territories, to your specific ecosystems? What is that, if there is still missing? What is that component or a few components that you think still need to be strengthened?
Can you repeat, please, or talk in Spanish?
Sí, la pregunta en español es, ¿qué es lo que falta para que los ecosistemas o sus territorios tengan derechos todavía? Después de todo el trabajo que ustedes han hecho, ¿qué es lo que todavía falta?
la buena voluntad de los políticos. Buena voluntad, porque los argumentos están todos ahí. Entonces falta la articulación entre ellos, porque todo se queda en una cuestión de negociación en estos espacios. Nosotros sabemos de esto. No hay ninguna, tal vez también porque yo tengo una buena voluntad, tal vez haya también una mala comprensión en algunos de ellos sobre cómo esto va a impactar en mi territorio. Y no hay un impacto mayor do que el impacto que la legislación ambiental ya hace. Es esto, tenemos esta protección y es esto. El impacto es, de nuevo, yo creo, y estamos trabajando con esta fundamentación, es desde adentro de los seres humanos, desde la comprensión que nosotros somos todos interconectados entre nosotros, seres humanos, y entre todos los demás seres de la madre tierra, todos los demás seres vivos, y mismo aquellos que nosotros pensamos no son vivos, como las rojas. Entonces, este es el cambio. Si esto va a cambiar de una manera que perjudique a ellos, no sé, creo que no es posible pensar, no alcanzan. Creo que una parte de ellos no alcanzan. Entonces, como tienen miedo de la paralización del desarrollo, como que una legislación que va a se quedar todo parado, no avanzan. Pero en la mayoría creo que un poco de buena voluntad del foco en resolver esta cuestión, que es una cuestión de vida, es lo que necesitamos, ¿no? Estamos todos con muchas cosas para hacer, muchas cosas para tener en cuenta, y ellos también, los políticos, y creo que esta no está. Creo que nosotros tal vez podamos traer esa responsabilidad para nosotros, porque hablando por mí, tal vez no estemos cumpliendo con esta necesidad de poner en cuenta, de iluminar esta cuestión como siendo una cuestión más importante, más básica do que todas las otras. Salir a las calles más veces, ¿no?
Yeah, no, I agree with what you're saying, Vanessa. I think we are all working towards a paradigm shift, but we also personally and as humans, we need to change, have this paradigm shift in our minds or in our hearts in order to be able to fully change and create a new path forward. So we're going to go next with Eduardo and then with Peter.
Bien, pues yo pienso que en el caso del Mar Menor, y voy a seguir un poco con la idea que también ha comentado Rodrigo, creo que es muy importante que en el caso del Mar Menor hemos sembrado con el cambio de paradigma a los derechos de la naturaleza, hemos sembrado una ilusión en 640.000 personas. Eso no es poco. Entonces, creo que es muy importante estar a la altura una vez que se consiga la ley que parece que va a salir, ya digo, en julio, en septiembre. Es muy importante, y para eso necesitamos también vuestra ayuda, estar a la altura de esa ilusión que hemos dado con este cambio de paradigma. Entonces, el movimiento social debe acompañar, como lo ha hecho desde el principio a la iniciativa legislativa popular, debe acompañar también en la aplicación de esa ley. Es decir, que no volvamos a caer en el mismo error de pensar que las leyes las hacen los políticos y las aplican los expertos, ya sean abogados o ecologistas. Es decir, solo unos pocos conocen la ley, solo unos pocos saben cómo aplicar la ley. Creo que ese ha sido uno de los errores del derecho ambiental. Y si estamos cambiando el paradigma para que los derechos de la naturaleza sean un nuevo escenario, y aquí en el caso del Mar Menor, porque claro, ya digo que aquí no hay una comunidad de pueblo originario ligada al Mar Menor. Aquí hay una sociedad que en el caso del Mar Menor ha sufrido emocionalmente y psicológicamente la pérdida el colapso de un ecosistema amado, un ecosistema muy querido. Entonces, quiero decir que a lo mejor ha habido otros conflictos en Murcia o en España, donde yo he participado como abogado y no había ese componente social tan fuerte. Entonces, en el caso, ya con esto termino, en el caso del Mar Menor, el componente social que nos ha permitido llevar la ley hasta el Congreso, tenemos que seguir ilusionándolo para que siga en la aplicación de la ley que reconoce los derechos al Mar Menor y se involucre totalmente, creando estructuras y también creando evidentemente un debate y una expectación mundial, que es lo que estamos haciendo aquí hoy, para que las gentes del Mar Menor se sientan conectadas con un nuevo enfoque y conectadas con una serie con toda la especie humana que quiere cambiar su relación con la naturaleza. Pero claro, para eso hay que darle herramientas.
Thank you, Eduardo, for that. And we're gonna go with Peter. Go ahead, Peter.
Thanks, Rafaela. Just to address a couple of the questions, really. I mean, a feature of the rights of nature movement is the idea of the cosmovision. And I think one of the most important elements of cosmovision for me is that it is intensely local, even intimate, because it's an ontological shift as well as a political shift. So it's an intensely local and intimate transformation, but also a transnational or planetary transformation. And I think that is an invitation to a particular kind of movement that is active very locally, but it also needs, if we're going to replicate and empower and disseminate these ideas, that the various elements of the transnational movement need to be intensely present to one another. We need to be visible to one another and to celebrate especially the achievements in a very visible way in order to grow the movement and to give confidence to those who are at an earlier point in advocating for the rights of nature, as we are on the island of Ireland. In terms of governance, I mean, I think there's a parallel in terms of the movement, that there's a parallel between the rights of nature movement and the restoration or rejuvenation of the movement for the commons. The rights of standing at the moment are deeply enclosed, especially in European territories. They're enclosed within the relationship between state and capital. The rights of standing, the rights to intervene politically and in planning processes are mediated very much through property interests, demonstrating an immediate property interest. So we have to disenclose those relationships in order to legitimize and explore new ways of new mechanisms that have legitimacy, that give people a right to defend their right to belong and their celebration of their belonging to local ecosystems with whom they want to cherish their right to thrive and coexist. So that's just a few thoughts about various points that were raised in the question, Rafaela. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. I think Rodrigo has something to add.
Yes, to the question, what's missing? Well, I hate to be like a reductionist, but I think rights of nature can be used either to protect nature or to restore it in a way. And those two ways of achieving them, I guess, needs what Vanessa said, and that it's political willing. In the first sense, to protect, we need at least government to steer away from the extractivist point of view that uses nature to as a way to grow the economy. And that means changing the economical model, at least in Latin America, that has gone at least to the path of using extractive industries as the basis of that growth. And that needs not only that is not only a Latin American or at least a Colombian problem, but this is almost like a international governance problem, because there's a lot of pressure of multinational corporations to use Latin America and to lobby with our politicians to, keep pushing through this direction. So we need changes in political power. And in the sense of restoring it, which is what the Atrato case is aiming for, of restoring the ecosystem, it needs, I mean, I don't want to sound vulgar, but it needs money, because mining devastates, and you need to use certain machines and certain scientific methods to restore the ecosystem to what it was. And that needs a lot of money. And that also needs like a political will or something like that, just by terms of where the budget goes. And that is very important to know, that there's a financial aspect to rights of nature that needs to be taken into account. And finally, we also need new legislation and new normative frameworks that go along the declarations of nature, of the rights of nature, because they also clash with other normative frameworks and they don't fit well. So there's need to be a lot of reform and a lot of learning in the path towards knowing where the rights of nature can go. What implications does personhood of a river have? Can we, I don't know, take a credit out on a bank for a river? Stuff like that makes a clash between the personhood and the rights of nature and the legislative system as it is right now.
I agree. Thank you, Rodrigo. And as you said, we will continue to run into these challenges. But what I wanted to say, and just to wrap this up, and something that I've realized across all the work that you're all doing and presenting, is that the Rights of Nature movement is an extremely collaborative movement. We all work together, and you've all demonstrated that you can't do it with one single part of society, but you need a change in every single part of society. Starts with a local movement, but then it takes people from all over the world to come and share and help and provide new ideas in order to create this new paradigm shift. And it also doesn't stop whenever the law is created, whenever the ordinance or whenever the new referendum has passed. It doesn't change there. As Vanessa was saying, it also changes with the education that comes along with it. And we need to always complement rights of nature and that work with education, because as you also all said, we need a change in the willingness of politicians. But if we start learning about rights of nature early on in life, whenever the next generation gets to be politicians, that's already going to be intrinsic. So I think that's what we're all working towards. And I think, at least for me, it gives me a lot of hope. I also want to bring everybody attention to the link that Peter has shared. We're also going to share this in the chat on Facebook. This is a link to the invitation that he has opened to us to submit to the Assembly in Ireland on your contributions to the degradation and loss of biodiversity, and how this can change, and how, as I said, we can all collaborate to bring rights of nature forward there as well. So I want to thank you all for this conversation. I think you all have amazing points, and it is very clear that we will all continue to work together. So thank you for your time. And yeah, I'm sure we will see each other soon. Thank you.